The sci-fi genre has always been one which explores complex philosophical ideas about our existence and our purpose in the universe. For 2 years now, Rick and Morty has been no exception. From telepathic brain parasites that embed themselves into the memories of their victims, to a microscopic theme park built inside the body of a homeless man. The show never fails to deliver episodes that are equal parts interesting and hilarious. The first thing you'll notice about the series is that it's a parody of Back to the Future, with high school student Morty Smith playing the young, naive Marty McFly character.
Are you telling me that you built a time machine out of a DeLorean?
Drunken grandfather Rick Sanchez is left to resemble Doc Brown.
When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious shit.
Both of whom are elderly, experienced, crazy guardians of protecting the fabric of time and space, though it's safe to say that's where the comparison ends.
How do you like that? How do you like that?
When it comes to Doc Brown, despite also living a long, full life of exploring the outer reaches of time and space, he's still filled with the same level of curiosity and wonderment. He's a man who always strives to discover more, gain more knowledge, and in many ways represents the human spirit, our natural curiosity to understand ourselves and the universe. Contrast this with Rick, lazy, cynical, and depressed. How can someone with such a passion for knowledge and discovery become so jaded?
Look, I don't know. I'm watching the same thing you guys are.
It could be that he's grown tired of the universe and what it has to offer, or perhaps there's another reason. The show repeatedly explores the concept of multiple universes, or the multiverse, an infinite collection of differing realities that Rick can interact with. There's a universe where all of humanity has evolved from corn, a universe just like ours except dogs are in charge of humans, and a universe where everyone is a Cronenberg monster.
Yeah, Cronenberg, Rick. But, I'm gonna miss Cronenberg world, because everyone was Cronenberged all along like us from the beginning,
In the episode The Ricks Must Be Crazy, this idea is taken one step further in the form of nested universes. Not only does the infinity of the universe expand forever outward until worlds where everything is on the cob becomes commonplace.
Are those mountains on a cob?
Now it deepens infinitely into these many sub-universes. In the episode, it's revealed that Rick's engine is actually a microverse, an expansive world containing an evolved intelligent species that he originally created with the sole purpose of providing energy which he could siphon to his spaceship. We then find out later in the episode that inside this microverse is yet another nested universe called a miniverse, and besides meeting its expected criticisms from Rick,
Dumb name.
It marks the beginning of a trend of sub-universes, later spawning the Tinyverse and most likely leading to a Smallverse, Littleverse, and all other kinds of verses. As this continues on and on, it begs the question, where does the trend begin? If creating a universe within a universe is physically possible, then it's reasonable to assume that Rick's universe, the supposedly highest level universe, is actually just a world contained in yet another world. We know that Rick created his universe, he observes this universe, and he has the power to destroy it. By definition, this makes Rick the god of this world. The same applies to the other two characters in the episode. And so for Rick to understand the creator of his universe is to comprehend his own god, his creator, his observer, and his potential destroyer. In the episode Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind, after Jerry is upset that Doofus Rick had to leave, Rick comes to comfort him. Now, on Rick's wall is a nice conspiracy board, and on this board there's a few familiar details, including Mr. Meeseeks, Abradolf Linklar, the Sigerians, and Rick's ray gun and spaceship. Rick is stringing together a conspiracy, but what do all of these seemingly independent elements all have in common? Well, each image features an item or character which best represents an episode in the Rick and Morty series so far, such as Dr. Xenon Bloom from Anatomy Park. This board brings about many questions, like how is Rick, in all of his adventures, able to distinguish those that became episodes? It's because through his genius, Rick has come to understand the universe that contains his universe. Our universe, which contains the show Rick and Morty. Let's go back to our definition of a god. The show has a creator, Dan Harmon, and the show has omniscient observers, the viewers, roughly 2 million of us. Every week we all tune in to see Rick living out an adventure for 20 minutes at a time through our TVs, computers, iPhones, watches. Of course we know that we're watching Rick, but the theory is that Rick not only knows that we're watching him, but he knows what will happen if we stop watching him. And that brings us to the topic of the potential destroyer. Let's take it back to The Ricks Must Be Crazy. The episode ends with Rick escaping from Zeep Zanthorpe and returning to his own universe once the truth has been spilled. However, rather than destroy the miniverse and start over from scratch, Rick decides to test his engine one last time, and lo and behold, it runs perfectly.
Let's see.
So why don't we look at this from Zeep Zanthorpe's perspective? In this short period of time, he learns who his god is, meets with his god, learns why he was created, and what his purpose is. Clearly unhappy with all of this, he has only one objective: to stop Rick from escaping the miniverse. Rick entered it as a last attempt to try and fix it, so that his spaceship can work again. Realizing that he hasn't been giving Rick what he wants, Zanthorpe prevents Rick from escaping so that he can't destroy the miniverse. After Rick eventually does manage to escape, in a final act of desperation, he decides to do what his god had originally planned for him. He forces his people to return to the primitive form of power generation. Zeep Zanthorpe is cursed with knowing exactly how meaningless his existence is, and knowing what he has to do to remain existing. Now let's bring it back to Rick. Already I imagine you guys are seeing the parallels. Here is a character who knows who his higher power is. It's us, the viewers. He knows what his sole purpose is, to provide entertainment to us, and he knows what will happen if he fails to do this. The show could be cancelled. This explains why he's constantly trying to coin his own catchphrases. It explains why he's constantly breaking the fourth wall, including episodes where he says,
See you next week, everybody.
Rick knows that we're watching him, and that he's a character in the show. Despite being in constant danger, he has this detached, almost bored attitude to being in genuine danger. This is because he knows that he has plot armor. Basically, the main character can't die. There are no real consequences to his actions in the show, as long as he remains funny and entertaining. Perhaps this is the reason he brings Morty along on his adventures. He's a seemingly useless character. In the past, it's been explained that he hangs around Rick to counteract his genius waves with not-so-genius waves. But maybe Morty tags along to make the adventures more interesting, to create chemistry between the characters, to serve a character arc to the audience. Or maybe Morty simply serves as the relatable character, an excuse for Rick to explain all of his scientific experiments in layman terms.
My portal gun was hacked remotely, Morty, obviously by the real killer to frame me.
Once we accept this theory, suddenly the promo commercials are part of the show.
Wake up, Morty, we're in a promo commercial. This isn't real life.
You just said it was real
He's
life.
a promotion from Planet Promos. He'll say anything to get you to watch our show.
Our show? What are you talking about,
No
Rick?
time.
This is Rick speaking in canon with the series. Rick does his best to convey the relevant details of the episode to the viewers, but he isn't entirely certain when the audience is listening. In Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind, Rick makes a passing comment explaining their change in clothes.
Hey, it's a good thing that space outlet had lab coats and your favorite kind of shirt in stock, huh, Morty?
Morty responds by saying,
Yeah, Rick, I heard you the first time. You don't have to keep saying it over and over.
but we, the audience, have only heard him say it once. Clearly Rick has to keep saying certain things enough until they make it into the show. This is the only way that he can move the plot in a certain direction. But you might be asking, why is Rick trying so hard to be entertaining? Surely he can simply acknowledge that his gods are yet to destroy him and that he can trust that the show is moving in the right direction. First, we'll make the assumption that Rick's timeline is roughly in sync with our own. Between each episode, approximately 1 week passes in Rick's time in any given season. The dates in the year also match up with our own because the family celebrate Thanksgiving during our Thanksgiving. Well, not my Thanksgiving because I live here, but I'm sure it's your Thanksgiving if you live here. They also celebrate Christmas near enough to our Christmas. If Rick knows the days that episodes air in our universe, then he can also figure out when seasons begin and end based on long breaks between episodes. Imagine Rick's concern when he realizes that the first season of his show started way later than most shows usually do. These irregular air times are an indication that the show is facing hurdles, that the show is being dragged through production hell.
Tune in to Rick and Morty Season 3 in like a year and a half or longer.
And herein lies the reason behind Rick's depression. His constant sarcastic commentary, one-liners, catchphrases, and fourth wall breaks are a desperate attempt to stop the show from being cancelled. He's burdened with the knowledge of how his universe could end, and has a direct responsibility in stopping it. He's tried multiple times to commit suicide, but being the main character of the show, this becomes an impossible task. In an interview with Dan Harmon about what sci-fi was and where it was going, he said, "Sci-fi is just us living in a world where people are starting to realize that we're inheriting the role of God. So we stopped talking about magic cows and beans and witches, and we just transferred that to something that feels, as it did back then, possible. And so in the show he offers up two very real representations of humanity. There's Rick, who represents our compulsive curiosity, a need to discover the unknown and understand a higher power. And the second is offered up through Jerry, representing humanity's ignorance, our contentness with not knowing, living in a comfortable bubble, and substituting science with pseudoscience and belief. Although the show portrays Jerry as a simpleton, the victim of Rick's judgmental cynicism, when we compare the two, something else becomes very apparent. Despite all of Rick's knowledge, he's clearly depressed and suicidal, and Jerry appears to be content with his life, however simple and small. It calls to question which life we as an audience would rather lead. Do you want to be a Rick or a Jerry? One of the most asked philosophical questions is, what is the meaning of life? But maybe instead of asking this, we should be wondering whether the meaning of life is something we should know. Who's to say there isn't a higher power that created us, that watches over us and could destroy us? As scientists constantly push the boundaries of discovery, we have to accept the possibility that our higher power may not be perfect. Like Rick, we could be being watched like a TV show, or providing some sort of entertainment to an alien race.
Show me what you got!
Or perhaps, like the miniverse, our entire existence is based on providing some meaningless resource. Or maybe we exist to perform some meaningless task, like passing butter.
What is my purpose?
You pass butter.
Oh my god.
On one hand, it makes us anxious to understand our purpose and to control it so we don't get cancelled. But on the other hand, it gives us peace of mind that sometimes knowledge is a burden, and our current state of not knowing is a blessing in disguise. As long as we don't absolutely know why we exist, it allows us to answer that question in any way we like.